All right, welcome to another episode of DUCKit. Today we have Sedge Beswick, the Managing Director of Scene Connects. Thank you for joining us. And by the way, this is our first guest who is not from the region, not related to the region, not originally from the Middle East, doesn't work in the region, and we're so thrilled to have her here, kind of share her experience and share her knowledge. Thanks for joining us, Sedge.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting.
Could you introduce yourself, I guess, to us and as well as people who might tune in and watch this? We know a little bit about you because of Lauren, who introduced us, and we've done a bit of research on you. But we'd love for you to kind of give us a quick intro.
Cool. I didn't see you guys stalking my LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm Sedge. For context, my background was like always in-house. So I worked at Red Bull, worked at ASOS. And then nearly 4 years ago, through Nike, I met our chairman, who kind of said to me, if you could run your own business, what would it be? And at the time, I was really interested in the influencer space because I was getting inundated at ASOS with emails from agencies being like, hey, we can do your influencer work for you. And I'd be like, brilliant, what would be the ROI? And no one can answer the question. And that for me felt like a huge gap in the market. So that's kind of what we came in to do. And then 4 years later, we worked with Nike, Panasonic, eBay, Instagram, so have quite a broad mix of clients that we work with. And that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Amazing. And so you have quite a star-studded group of customers. What makes you stand out? Why do they want to work with you? What makes kind of your approach different?
Well, there's the kind of like more corporate thing of like, what is our proposition and what we do differently. And like
sure.
That on the surface is like, we do archetypal alignment. So we really make sure that it doesn't look like a badging exercise, a pay to play space. We really know that like the influencers that we partner and the celebrities we partner brands with really feel aligned to that brand message. We also are really focused on the ROI. So we don't do a one size fits all. We don't go like, here's 2 guaranteed KPIs and it's an engagement rate of 4%. But we really understand like why the business even wants to do influencer and celebrity work in the first place. And then we would make recommendations of whether that should, be a podcast, an IGTV series, TikTok. And those models and those KPIs change based on what that content output is and what the ambition is for that business. But on like a purely kind of like corporate way of putting it, I think one of the most interesting things about us is that I haven't been like churned through the agency model. So I have quite like a blunt and direct approach to doing things. And for me, I will literally just walk into a room and be like, right, ASOS, we did this and we could drive this. Your brand is similar in X, Y, and Z. And I kind of almost don't understand the whole like step 2 process of an agency of chemistry sessions and building rapport. And then you do 700 iterations of a pitch deck. So we kind of like sweep out the bullshit and just go for it.
I feel like you and Chris can relate on that front. That's literally how DUCKLIFE has been built.
Idea.
Although I am ex-agency partly, but not fully.
You definitely need the agency bit. Like all the guys I've hired are all agency nerds and understand the process and the ropes and the operational side of doing things. But sometimes I will just challenge and question, like, really, do we need to do it that way? Or like, yes, that was great. Like we don't cost based on time. So, and a lot of clients would be like, what? An agency? And you don't bill us based on hours. But that for me, that logic makes no sense whatsoever, because it's all around the like scope of value and what we can deliver in that time period.
Yeah, I think being on the operations side, I would say what you would call, Steve, or agency would call client side or whatever for such a long time, gives you practicality of how a business actually runs, right? So this whole like agency structure and system and hourly costing, all that stuff doesn't really make sense. It's not very practical for a business. An organization has business objectives that it needs to meet, and fundamentally everything is a derivative of that. And if you take the agency approach, like it doesn't make sense, right? Cool. So yeah, we're probably very similar. So when it comes to influencers, obviously Steve and I have lots of experience with that in the region, from the multiple brands we were a part of historically. But I'm thinking today, I think the way brands are going to work with influencers is going to change. I mean, fundamentally, user behaviors are changing, social media consumption and how it's being used, et cetera, is changing as well. What are you kind of seeing these days, I guess during COVID? How's it changing?
It's been really interesting, the whole like COVID lockdown. We work across a few different territories, which is obviously each territory has had a slightly different approach. And we've had some clients things have accelerated from an influence perspective because, you know, they're a D2C platform and they want to like ramp up those efforts, or they might be grocery and things are doing well. Or actually, you know, we work with a dating platform and people who are in lockdown are like, I never want to be single in lockdown ever again. So it paused our work whilst we're in lockdown because their download rates are just absolutely soaring and they're through the roof. But then we've had other clients who kind of don't want to think about putting out content that could be insensitive. So we've really, you know, one of the agencies within our group is a retail display agency, like for the exact same reason, all of their clients have taken the same approach. Whereas for us, like the same thing just hasn't happened twice, which has been super, super interesting and has kind of kept our whole team kind of on our toes, working out kind of what is the best approach for each of our different clients. In terms of like what that actually means on paper is like you'll have all the data, like WhatsApp is up 40%, TikTok 39%, and people are on their phones more than ever because they're limited in the activities that they can do, and they're looking for that degree of escapism. They're looking to be entertained. So actually the like super cute pictures of you in a bikini holding some tanning lotion, that's just not going to cut it. And I do think what's happening at the moment with COVID will kind of cut out the kind of crappy influencers, and they exist and they give the industry a really bad name. And instead, you're really going to have to focus on people who have a skill set. So, you know, the Joe Wicks who can deliver PE for the nation globally at 9 a.m. UK time, you tune in, you work out with someone who is an expert in their field. Or you've got people who are giving advice on like what it means from a financial point of view now and how you can better manage you know, your monthly ingoing, outgoings, those people that really have credibility. DIY is going through the roof. So I think it's coming back more to the purpose of why you're working with influencers, and that content is far more kind of like niche, but they are experts in their field, and that's why they have the following in the first place. So, and I also think the other interesting thing is like a lot of businesses have stopped with affiliate models. So a lot of influencers promote content knowing that they'll get a 5% kickback for every sale they make, but businesses now, you know, want to make as much of that margin themselves, and a lot of influencers don't necessarily get those big brand deals. Instead, they kind of worked off those affiliate models. So I think, you know, some influencers are coming out high on this the same way brands are kind of coming out on top, and some influencers are going to struggle and probably not be here in the next 4 weeks, 4 months.
And on that kind of affiliate kind of note that you put out, I think, is the remuneration or attribution or anything changing in COVID, since brands want to have, you know, the bigger piece of the pie? Is that changing? Are the KPIs changing, evolving?
Yeah, and again, that varies because actually sometimes, especially if it's a celebrity partnership, we would produce and create that content for that brand. And actually you can't get into a studio to produce a Nike shoot, or you can't get down to like a location because people can't leave their houses. Actually, that content does take more of a kind of like lo-fi approach, and it kind of goes back a few years in terms of what that output was. So that obviously changes if you're not taking someone for an entire day. But actually a lot of influencers have kind of, we've been quite overwhelmed by influencers saying, you know, we'll cut our rates by 25%, 30%, 40%. And again, those are the ones, without kind of, you know, shaming too many influencers, but they don't have that real core niche and skill set.
Yeah.
So the ones that have kind of paused to make sure that their content isn't sensitive, couldn't kind of be misconstrued the wrong way, they're the ones that are kind of like, they've got reserves, they're thinking really as a business, and they'll come out of this stronger.
I've really seen on the influencer front, I think one of the observations I've seen is the creativity. Like it's like a real demand for an increase in creativity now. And I guess TikTok almost like has started to force that. Like I see it as as the creators platform. But certainly over, you know, observation that we're seeing here is the level of creativity, like almost being demanded from a consumer side to be entertained, given that a lot of people are in lockdown. And that's going to be one of the shifts, I think.
Such an important platform to talk about because yes, they were doing brilliantly already. Yes, like you couldn't ignore them, but brands were still nervous for various reasons, you know, not understanding the platform, age gate issues on the channel, and also having like being a Gen Z only. And actually now you've got people's granddads going viral with their daily TikToks of what they're doing. And become this real community where everyone can get involved. And like most of our briefs since we've been in lockdown have been around TikTok. And all brands that were kind of like, yeah, we should do TikTok. Maybe we'll see how things go. They're like, yeah, you remember that idea? Let's rework it. Let's get it out the door. And it's not just Gen Z. You know, we are working with some people who are in their 40s and their 50s creating content because they've got those audiences ready to go, literally just from lockdown. And it's fun. It's playful. You laugh, you tune in, you feel like you're part of, as I keep saying, like the community word really does feel rife when you think about TikTok.
Yeah, it's like you go into a TikTok hole. Like, I mean, you just disappear for like 3 hours and you come out and you're like, I don't know what just happened.
Right? But also, I'm like, yeah, I can definitely do a Beyonce dance routine. I'm like the most malfunctioned, uncoordinated person on the planet, but here I am. My other half is just like, this is really hideous. And if you could just stick to like being nerdy and doing reports, that would be way better for me.
I will follow you. I will follow you. We have a TikTok Lite now at home. The wife has, like, we're fully kitted out. Yes, so we are, you know, our weekends are, should we go out and see friends? Absolutely not. Let's make some TikToks.
That is brilliant. I'd love to know how many ring lights have been purchased through eBay and Amazon. I bet that has like seen a really huge spike from people's having to obviously create more content indoors.
Probably, yeah. So I have a strange question. Steve and I have this kind of love-hate relationship with what we do, right? So we love, you know, the whole like creative side of it, building brands, hopefully generally having a positive impact in the brands, you know, with the brands that we build, etc. But every now and again, and I'll speak for me now when I say this instead of both of us, just to be safe. You know, especially now during COVID and having time to reflect and look in the world and how it's changing, you know, and you know, I guess consumers being more susceptible to kind of influence, let's call it influence instead of social media or influencers. It's obvious that the world is like lived in abundance, right? In a world where you know, there's never enough, and all of us, I think, on this call, our jobs is to basically make sure people buy more shit or do more shit. You know what I mean? And you know, it's kind of true. And there's this quote that's been going around for so long that says, you know, that I don't know how it goes exactly, but the most brilliant minds of our time are basically so focused on getting people to click. Right. So, you know, like, and I think that's more evident than ever, right? With platforms like TikTok, for example.
Yeah.
You know, at what point does your kind of conscience kind of kick in? Because for me, it happens on a weekly basis nowadays, especially I'm looking at COVID, I'm looking at climate change, I'm looking at my, you know, behavior, I'm buying stuff every day. Today, I probably already had 3 deliveries at 12 p.m. Right? So at what point, you know, because I'm really curious because you're super successful, you've been in social media for such a long time, you've seen the power of it. At what point, or does it ever hit your conscience? And how do you manage that? And it's, you know, and you could say, no, Chris, I have no problem with it. And that's fine too. But is it something that kind of, you know, arises?
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think as a team, collectively, we're quite good at like, if something doesn't fit comfortably with us, or we read something and we feel like this brief's kind of been written for the wrong reasons. And this is a slightly different thing to like the sustainability model, but we got a brief probably about 2 years ago now. And it was like, we want really diverse influencers, preferably someone visible without a limb. And like, we read the brief and I was like, this is horrendous, because this just feels like a box ticking exercise. It doesn't feel like they're doing this for the right reasons. If I tweeted this brief, you'd be screwed. And so actually we didn't even put our hat in the ring to respond. And, you know, sometimes those conversations are quite fun when you've got an investor and a chairman and a finance director who's like, you know, business is business. And actually, I think we can make ourselves really stand for something and do right by our customers, but also kind of on a more broader level, when we start with the why would we do this and what would we do? And if we're not proud of it, then, or we feel uncomfortable when we're doing it, then it absolutely isn't the right thing to do. And I have no qualms whatsoever with saying no to things. Yeah. And again, maybe this comes from like being in-house versus agency. I don't have that kind of like I'm a good salesman. I didn't realize until I had my own agency that I can like sell what I do, influencers, podcasts, video content creation. Like I get it and I understand it from a brand's perspective, but I don't want to kind of be land grabby and just take work if actually the knock-on effect, or if someone else realizes that we did that, there could then be a kind of more negative impact for us as Connect brand. So yeah, I think in short, I do think about it. I think about it a lot. And also we will go back to a client and say like, we really like this, but have you thought about doing it this way? Or if you think about consumer trends or consumer behaviors, actually, maybe it's better to do this instead. And I think most brands, I've never really had any pushback from a brand when we've gone, look, we think about this shit all the time. Why don't you turn it on its head slightly and do this?
Yeah.
I actually think
you try to push people in the right direction.
Yeah.
Sorry, Steve. Yeah.
No, I was going to say I mean, one of the changes that the industry might see, and we talk about this a lot, Chris and I, that consumption piece, but consumer demand is kind of waned quite a lot over the last couple of months for obvious reasons. So, what would that technically mean, I guess, from our industry as a whole, but particularly from an influencer standpoint? Because from an influencer standpoint, you're almost influencing to take action. So is that action, and Chris, to the point that we talk about, which is that action more a cause to do good, to make changes in your habits? That's how you can influence people, and brands as they evolve, I guess, could start shifting in that way. And I think I read something on your site, which was it was around 80% of influencers look to make the world a better place, but 20% are like the Kardashians of the world. Was that what I read? Something that
Paraphrasing a little bit there. But no, it's true. Even if you like, we've had a mental 2020, but like Australian bushfires, Celeste Barber raised $40 million for families that were suffering, for air forces, and to help. And then you've got like, even it's tiny, but we've just been doing work with, I got inundated by celebrities who were like, what can I do to help? Like, we're in COVID, NHS is like overloaded. What is it that I can do? And it's minor, but we work with eBay. So we're like, right, let's start hosting some charity auctions. You're going to spend time clearing out your wardrobes, clearing out your closets, that iconic outfit you wore at the BAFTAs, or when you were on TV. Actually, some of those outfits, if we resell them and we auction them off, and all of that money has gone through to charity. And I think they're the things where you can really tell the kind of really thoughtful players in the game who, yes, they have influence and yes, they have a following, but they don't want to just promote charcoal toothpaste all day or the latest slimming tablet. They really want to stand for something, and they really want to show that in times of need, they are there. Or if we need to change behaviors on something, they have an opinion on it. And it's not piggybacking, and it's not saying, oh, that person over there, like Jamelia Jamil's talking about how much she hates slim tea and booty and all of those. It's not then every other influencer does the same things. Like, it has to be true. And I hate the fact I was trying to avoid saying this word throughout the whole podcast, but the word authenticity, like if it's not authentic to them, they shouldn't be talking about it, but they know where the kind of red tape is and where they can kind of make a difference and, again, stand for something.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think Steve and I also agree on the fact that like today brands probably have more influence, power and impact than politicians, than anything else, right? So if I were to make a bet on brands or our politicians kind of fixing our future or improving, our journey moving forward, I'd probably bet on a brand before I bet on any politician. And that's globally. I'm not pointing anyone out, just generally speaking. But that influence comes with like a huge responsibility. And that's where I feel like maybe the line is a little bit murky in terms of, right and wrong. If you're commercially benefiting from your influence, but also, advocating for authenticity and good, I mean, how do brands of influencers kind of manage that? And how are you seeing that kind of evolve? Because for me, as much as I like to pretend that I'm not influenced by people or personal brands, I'm of course influenced by it, right? So how is that going to change? I mean, the world is completely moving to a place where brands are going to be brands, be they people, influencers, or brands themselves, like Red Bull or Nike or Apple. How is that going to evolve in your kind of view of the world?
I mean, first off, like, I'm totally biased because I've collected Nike trainers since I was like 8 years old. But I think what Nike have done, their client, but what Nike have done since we've been in lockdown, like globally, has been superb.
Yeah.
And that's exactly to your point, is like, you know, we can have our Prime Minister go onto your screens and say why you should be staying at home. But when you do it with the emotion that a Nike does it, and you see that content, you're just like, shit, I'm not leaving my sofa. Like, this is it. Like, this is the real deal. And I think that's, again, influencers become the amplification of brands. Obviously, some of them have their own brands within their own right, but it is, so, and that's where the kind of archetypal alignment comes in, of like really striving to kind of boost that and to get that seen and heard by more people. And that's the real power and benefit of influencers, is like, and I hate the word influencers. I feel like we should probably get that elephant out the room, but it's like, it was always meant to be an industry term. Yeah. And it's really wanky. Like, if you find someone who's like, hey, I'm an influencer, you know, they're the type of person you don't want to work with.
Absolutely.
Have someone who's like, I'm a videographer, I just happen to have 200,000 followers, then brilliant. Let's see your videography at its like highest, like, this is the brief, this is what we want you to talk about and to show, and you see what that product can do in reality, versus, you know, someone holding a camera going, this is the best camera and you should all buy it. And I think it's really, again, like always coming back to that skill set and that why, and then you can do it the right way. So we always say, and like our house rules are, it's not about how much you pay, but it's about how much you care.
Yeah.
So you can always pay a Kardashian, for our earlier reference, and they will promote whatever you want. And they might not explain the product, you might not understand what happens, but you can get that high impact reach from working with a Kardashian. But actually, they don't care about your product. They haven't probably tried your product. So how do you as a brand start to create this kind of two-way relationship that really goes like, we care about you, we're going to promote you in this way, or we're going to, you know, not pay you to like directly promote our product, but we might pay you as an advance to like write that book that you keep talking about that you just haven't been able to financially afford to do. And that's where the relationship is cemented. And then it's not, I'm trying to remember which ones I said now. It's not about how much you pay, it's about how much you care. Yeah, then it's, this is hilarious. I pitch these and I present these all day long. I've gone through them in a while. But content that tries to sell doesn't, but content that tries to help does. So again, it kind of comes back to the like videographer analogy of like, it's not being like an ad placement. It's really understanding and give a deeper meaning to why that person's talking about sustainability, or why they're trying to, you know, change the legalities around upskirting, and that can be like why they are wearing that pair of trainers when they're going for a run, but it has to be someone that specializes in 5K runs, that you can understand the benefit of that product. Can I remember our third? Content that tries to sell doesn't. Isn't this hilarious? I've got such a like lockdown brain.
Not a test though. I don't even know that there is a third, right? So,
yeah.
That's totally fine. They could stop at two. It sounds like a good pitch.
You sold for me at two. Yeah.
Not just about the reach, but it's about the authenticity. I've kind of covered that off when I've explained the other 2 points.
Yeah.
My team will be like, oh God, we're so embarrassed.
So I just, okay, on that note, so thanks. But on that note, so, you know, my kind of experience with influencers has kind of been probably not ideal in terms of where the region is, how we kind of work with the influencer kind of world, and maybe we are seeing signs of kind of progress and innovation and kind of, you know, learnings, but generally the Middle East sees influencers as a blitz strategy, right? It's like, I need to see the traffic jump. I need to hit my, you know, GMVs. It's not a very strategic channel, right? It's more a blitz channel. It's more a campaign channel. It's not a brand building channel.
Yeah.
But the way you keep describing influencers or that channel is not typically how it's portrayed regionally. Now, that's not to say that there are brands locally that do it the right way, but generally speaking, I feel that the maturity of the kind of influencer channel here is not probably where the UK or Europe is at the moment, or even the US or Canada. But on that note, why would someone use influencers? Because I mean, what type of a brand, what type of an industry, what type of a product, or is that kind of, you know, irrelevant? And in your perspective, what's the best mix, right? Because if you think about marketing in general and all the channels that we have, why is influencer marketing super important?
So there's quite a few different prongs that I can take there. So I think the first is like, why would people work with influencers? I think when you're speaking to an influencer agency or speaking to an influencer, it's thinking, well, why do I, again, want to do this? And that why changes based on each business. So actually, there's kind of a bit of a theory that influence marketing is super cheap. Actually, it's just, it might not cost as much as above the line marketing, but you still have to, if you want something decent at the end of it, you need to be able to pay and use, again, using people for their talent, but also for their reach. So I think some brands come to us and they want more content. So that might be, we worked with, trying to remember from an under NDA, we worked with a very large, very well-known fragrance company. And actually they came to us
We
and
should
they
stop
said,
there and try to figure it out right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to decipher. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, carry on.
But we worked with them, and the brief was ultimately like for them to send their brand teams to all of these different regions to capture localized content. It was going to cost a shit ton of cash. So what they wanted to do was identify localized influencers that could create content for them at scale that they could then amplify through paid. And we covered like Malaysia, Taiwan, UAE, and the way in which people use those platforms is totally different based on those regions. So they each had their own bespoke brief. Every single month they received product, and we decided to go down a nano influencer route, but we were creating around 360 pieces of content a month that brand could then use and amplify through those localized handles and through paid media. That job wasn't to, drive footfall. It wasn't to generate clicks. It was solely so they had great localized content that was a good cost value. Then we obviously have we want influencers to attract new audiences, to get as much traffic and to sell as much product as possible. And that changes. Like sometimes with those brands, you need a Nike, Kevin Durant, Michael Jordan. You need that like big wow, heavy hitter. But actually that can also happen at kind of a midway. But the thing that kind of people miss with those is the longer you work with that person, the more their audience gets invested in the content that they're seeing. And that's where we would really recommend, like, it's not going to be a 20K project, a 3 weeks max, influencers you never speak to again, because people are kind of bored of it and they see past it, and the week after they're promoting one of their competitor brands. So, my favorite stat is like, and this is global, but you have to see a piece of content 11.4 times from a brand before you convert. So it is that building that trust piece, and influencers can add to that, because you might have an above the line campaign, you might have your own podcast, and actually you've then got this trickle of content on an always on basis from these content creators too. Or you might be doing it because you want to grow your social following and you want a few of those like wow heavy hitters. So I would, if you're thinking about starting with influencers, working on like what it is and what your core purpose is in doing that. Then you've got to also, like, one of the funniest things that we see is, so we actually worked with a US brand, a men's brand that was about to launch in the UK. And the brief was phenomenal. It was like, we want to work with the coolest fucking dudes possible. They really have to have, like, they might be an entrepreneur and they're about to launch their own business. They might be, an editor at GQ, but they've gone like so under the radar and they're only like the sub-editor at the moment. But we want to like create these relationships so early on and make them like the opinion leaders of this brand as we launch in the UK. We're going to use their assets in above the line creative. So we sent this amazing list of influencers and content creators and editors across, and they were like, what about this guy? And he had like 4.8 million followers. He had actually bought his following and it was predominantly in Russia. His second following was the US. And I was like, cool, you're trying to market to the UK, but you haven't even thought about his audience demographic and whether you're going to hit that and target it. And I think sometimes brands say what they want to do, and then what in their head that actually is, it's so many worlds apart. Yeah. So I think there's always a bit of an alignment job too, to make sure like expectation versus reality are aligned.
So on that last point,
So
basically
true.
The maturity and the understanding of the brief is sometimes, unfortunately, not really, I would say, on par with the objective, right? So I think, what you're trying to say is you have the same problem we have, but not to the same extent, right? So you have brands who want to work with influencers because it's probably the right thing to do, or they hear about it, or it's a trend or whatever, and they want reach and they want all the high level KPIs, but they don't really understand exactly what they want to do or how they want to do it, right? And then you try to navigate them through that process to make sure that everything is clear. Right?
Exactly.
That's essentially what you're saying. Cool. I also kind of want to get your kind of thoughts on influencer marketing versus, let's say, digital marketing in general. And there's always this debate between attribution, you know, what's real, what's not, what's attributable to an influencer, what's attributable to, let's say, performance marketing ad, etc., or anything that's paid.
Yeah.
You know, I guess as people who work in marketing or advertising, our role is you know, to help, you know, build a brand from, you know, top of the funnel all the way through. But the attribution models are arguably probably a mess, right? And they're all based on assumptions, right? That's just, I mean, we can debate it. I'm sure you have a position on data and attribution, but generally speaking, our objective is to kind of acquire new customers, right? So your job is, you know, hey, you know, customer X, if you want to grow, there's 2 ways to do it. Get your existing users or customers to buy more, or go attract new customers. And on the new customer front, how do you kind of navigate that attribution? Because digital marketing, let's say digital marketing or paid marketing, is basically trying to find somebody that's exactly your customer and marketing to them. So that's arguably, I would say, you know, correlation instead of causation. And then on the influencer side, you could say it's the opposite. I could be acquiring more customers because it's not that targeted. It's not like I can select an influencer list from lookalikes of customers and match audiences, right? It's not that clear cut. So how do you navigate between the two of those? And what's your view on that kind of responsibility with attribution and getting it right, and then charging for it, right? What's kind of your view? Because you know, I think it's ever evolving, ever changing. It's an organic discussion. I think as the tools get better, as we learn, etc., I think that evolves. But it's very hard. I remember in-house when we were at Kareem or Noon or Rocket Internet, it was always a huge debate, and it's a growing debate that we read about all the time. But yeah, how do you kind of, you know, stand on that stuff?
Yeah, so this is something Facebook offer, but it's also, there's other third parties which do it, which I think are a bit currently ahead of where Facebook is. But one of the things we've been doing a lot of is brand uplift studies and looking at the impact of influencer content versus consumers that haven't seen that influencer content, and looking at how that kind of marries up to intention to purchase and like trust of the brand and stuff. So some of that stuff's really, really interesting. And you can also then kind of MVP test that and look at what type of content, what type of person works best for that brand to drive the highest uplift, so that you can start to kind of create those audiences and those influencer bases off the back of it. So we do a lot of that. The two like really most common ways of kind of attribution for influencers is a discount code. So enter Sedge at checkout to get 20% off. And then that is obviously slightly better in terms of like actually looking at the full meaty report, because you can then attribute who converted, who signed up, what it did to your CRM database, you know, what their average basket value was, all of that fun stuff, or tracked UTM links, which is the bespoke tracking. I know you understand, but just in case there's someone else kind of listening in. So, you know, you'll have a asos.com / and a little bit of code, but that is all done based on last click only. So, you know, again, for argument's sake, Q4, when every business is trying to sell everything, and you've got people going, hey, husband, can you buy me this? That doesn't, and they've taken a screenshot and sent it through to WhatsApp, you can't attribute that. So one of the things that we've been doing, which you can do on like YouTube, you can do on blogs, is also adding pixel tracking into the influencers channels, so that you can then see the impact of the last 30 days. Which also works well. And then we also look at, and this depends on your budgets and whether you can do it, but we also look at how content performs in paid, whether it's celeb, influencer, or kind of normal branded content, for want of a better expression.
Yeah, but I mean, fundamentally, the problem is that whatever has more trackable ROI gets more money.
Yes.
Right? So that still stands in every organization. And I think that's fundamentally the problem, right? So it's like, okay, performance marketing, which is the mix of correlation and causation, but their performance, you know, is trackable and measurable, super easy. I can follow it on a day-to-day chart, maybe second by second chart to some extent, and I can see that my investment is bearing fruit on a live basis. Whereas if I go and build this full strategy to build my brand, with influencers and most of that stuff being more difficult or more challenging to track, and the attribution is probably not as clear cut. A brand will overinvest in something that it can see, touch, and understand, whereas the one that takes more strategy, discipline, maturity, doesn't get the right attention, right? So, and compound that with the fact that marketing leaders are always underempowered within organizations to argue about building a brand, right? So the CFO has more to say and bang on the table than the CMO does, right? I think what you do, and I think what we're trying to do is build brands at the end of the day. That's fundamentally, I think, our underlying objective. But it's very hard to do when executive teams or leaders in organizations only kind of pick routes that they understand or care to understand out of, let's say, the laziness of their or lack of intent to understanding how to build a brand, right? So how are you kind of seeing that with your clients? Because do you ever, are you managing both performance and, let's say, branding channels, let's call them branding channels, like influencer marketing, et cetera, and social media, et cetera, and content? Or are you only doing content and influencer? Are you doing both?
We do both. And it kind of comes back to the earlier point of like helping brands to identify the reasons to why they want to work with influencers. Yeah. And sometimes we literally have a 24-year-old who really loves Made in Chelsea, and that's why they want to do influencer marketing, because they want to go for dinner with someone in a work context that they could meet. And again, like, we then have a job to help them shape what that output could be. But if you're trying to sell a pair of trainers and you're talking around like the latest drop or the latest colorway or the off-white collab, that's way easier to drive that director literally to purchase. And also those platforms are built for getting people to check out as quickly as possible. So we can get like super nerdy, really into the detail there. We work with the second biggest distributor in the UK, and the insight that we have, like, I can tell you on an influencer to influencer level, on average, how quickly someone could sell out 150 units per SKU. And that's the kind of level we're talking about. But when we're then working with, a piece of kit that's $8,500, or we're working in automotive, that is more of the kind of trust, the brand building, the understanding of the product, the how-to, versus like, you don't see an Instagram picture of someone going, I did such and such on a camera, and that their followers go, brilliant, I'm just going to go and spank $3,500 to $8,500 on a camera. Like, that is just consumer behavior. And I think when you're in those brands, and especially when it's electricals, people tend to be in brand for longer. So it takes a bit longer to do the new shiny thing in marketing because they don't know it, or they feel a bit insecure about kind of jumping in 2 feet forward. But actually, they then understand that this isn't necessarily going to be direct attribution immediately, but what is the kind of long-term gain that you'll have versus something that is like, ASOS, a £14 t-shirt, an £18 phone case. That trial you would do because you know how simple and easy it is to return it if it's not quite right, if you decide you like monkeys instead of unicorns that next week kind of thing. And
why would someone, so I've never worked with an agency when I was in-house, ever. Okay. And I was, and it's just funny how the world comes full circle. So I now run an advisory / agency with Steve. So
it's an advisory.
It's an advisory. We're positioning it as an advisory, not an agency. Anyway, but the reality is, when I was in-house, we built everything in-house. We built our own performance marketing, our own data analytics, our own BI. We built our own influencer or celebrity managing team, et cetera, et cetera. Why would someone, especially such big brands that have such big budgets, why would they reach out to agencies like yours? Is there?
So similar to you, like ASOS and Red Bull, we never used agencies. Everything was done in-house. When I was at ASOS, there were 3,500 people working there. They really kind of understood why they're about to invest in something. And the biggest investment was the people that they had on the ground. Yeah. So actually my biggest nervousness when I set up agency was like, surely everyone in-house will know like what to do and how to do it. But actually I was really shocked at how far behind some brands were. And when I was going in to talk about X, they hadn't even kind of done A yet. And I think a lot of it comes down to like resource and capacity. They don't necessarily have the headcount that they need to be able to deliver it. It also comes down to kind of the expertise. And I think the main thing is like when you are in-house, and I think an ASOS is, I would argue now, knowing and being in, working in different businesses from an agency view, but ASOS likes to experiment. They like to try things. Like, I'm sure this has changed now, but I never really had a budget that I was sticking to. I'd just like email the CEO and be like, what's up, bro? Like, I think we should do something. And he'd be like, crack on. And then afterwards I'd be like, oh shit, we just drove X sales. And it was never part of it because ASOS really understood the importance of having a brand. Whereas actually, like, as I kind of said, like, we've got clients that, one of my clients has been in the business for 33 years. And when I first met him, I was like, dude, I'm only 30. You've been working in that one company for longer than I've been alive, which is like the dumbest thing to say in like a new business meeting. But it stuck. And he would always like in meetings would go like, you know, she's been around the block and been working at these businesses whilst I've been, you know, sitting here the whole time that she's been born. So it is just kind of like, I think there's a bit of nervousness when you haven't kind of jumped around and done multiple things that actually get people in who are experts in that field. And that isn't just for influencers only. That might be, you know, paid media. It might be, you know, podcast production and creative. It might be retail display, branding. And it's because, you know, you've kind of got this hothouse of expertise that really, really give a shit about doing the right thing and also pushing you and challenging outside of your comfort zone. That I think often in-house, you can just kind of like go, yeah, brilliant. And you just get through day to day without kind of lifting your head above water.
Is that originally why you started writing books? Because you realized that there was a huge gap? Is that where the kind of putting it down on paper and sharing the knowledge came from?
I'd love it to be like that thought out. My first book was 140 Twitter lols, and ASOS, I'm a bit of like a workaholic, and I hate questions when people are like, you know, talk to me about your work-life balance. And I'm like, God, I just want to work all the time and I love it. And that's what gets me excited, and that's what gets me out of bed, and that's also what calms me. And I get that that's not everyone's jam, and I'm a bit weird. But at ASOS, God, what year was I in? I was probably my third or fourth year at ASOS. I did 5 in total, and ASOS had 3 profit warnings. And I was used to like getting in the office at 7:30, leaving at like 8:30. At the time, I looked after the US, Australia, Russia. So I was used to all these different time zones. And then when you have profit warnings, the first thing to get cut is the marketing budget. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden I was like, holy shit, what do I do with all these extra hours in the day? And I was like, I'm going to write a book. I mean, again, bit of a nerd. And then when I set up the agency, and actually I despised writing the book. I found it far more stressful. In my head, I was like very Sarah Jessica Parker, sitting at a laptop, and you know, the whole thing could be done for me. And it's obviously not the case. And then I was like, I'm never doing a book. Books are the stupidest things. I don't know why anyone writes them. But when I set up the agency, I had like another wave of like platforms had shifted. It wasn't really about Twitter anymore from the brands that we were working with. And obviously the focus was on Instagram, but also I was like, there's so many amazing, brilliant Instagrammers that just aren't getting the recognition that they need. And so it was kind of, they kind of follow a similar trend. So 140 Twitter lols was like, they've all got like someone who's shit hot on Twitter and then like the tip at the bottom, but they like, it could be a comedian and it's quite lighthearted. Like I always say, I've got like quite strong toilet humor. And then this Instagram was like a similar thing. So it's like, make Instagram your business. It was 100 accounts that were shit hot, but it was like electricals, fashion, beauty, comedy. And it was just like almost a bit of a like, these people are great. I think you should love them and follow them too, versus it kind of being any more logic and science behind it than that.
I guess chapter 3 is like TikTok. I
mean, probably should be. And I should be using it down and not having anything to do at weekends to do it. But I think I'm too mentally scarred of the associated to doing it. Writing it's the easy bit.
Yeah.
All the other bullshit that comes with it. The legality of using people's tweets for copyright reasons in a book.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. There's a guy called Andrew who was like the legal director or legal chairman or whatever his title was at ASOS. And he was like, I'm also a bit bored, I'll do this. So I had like the best people kind of helping me to kind of cover all the legal aspects as well, which was quite funny.
That's awesome.
Super cool.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
And what's kind of like the game plan? What's the game plan with Scene Connects?
Well, I guess the game plan is like get through lockdown and normal and way of working. It's made me think a lot. Like, I think there's always, we're part of a holding group. The chairman has 6 agencies, and because I'm the only one that hasn't kind of been molded through the agency process, I'm often the one to like throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. And working from home was a big one for me. And it was always like, well, all the other agencies are in. And now I have proven, and the team have proven, that we work so efficiently from home. So this like models and stuff like that I'd like to stick with and keep going after this. And obviously clients aren't going to want to go for breakfast, lunches and dinners with an agency partner anytime soon. Then we also have what we call Connects Cast, which is our podcast production. That's been super busy throughout this because, you know, it's something you can do remotely, as we're kind of doing now, and you can still kind of keep in touch. Also, guests have got more time and are more dedicated to kind of focusing on that. So, and then the production arm we're doing a lot more with too. And that's something I really want to ramp up when we are out of this, which is like helping influencers, celebrities to create that even better content. And that we've done TV ads with influencers and celebrities before that's come from thinking social from the TV perspective. And so scaling up that video team and looking at that really.
Any plans to come to the region?
Yeah, please.
It's definitely something we chatted about for sure.
And on the work from home thing, so obviously everyone had, I guess, an initial struggle with it, but then everybody kind of adapted. And I think most people that I speak to have all come to the realization, like, actually, damn, this actually works. I kind of sort of prefer it. I probably won't do it 100% forever, but I kind of think I'm going to shift my lifestyle to kind of have a work from home kind of hybrid lifestyle. But the one thing I'm struggling with, and I don't know about you, and I think I know the answer to this question because you're a workaholic, I find I'm working more. I find I'm at my desk earlier, obviously, because I don't have to commute, I don't have to go anywhere. And I kind of feel like I never leave my desk because it's in my home, right? So how are you managing that? Because I think Steve and I have just become, I mean, productivity has gone up, I think, in the team. Business is generally okay, so knock on wood, we're fine. But the balance is super fucked up. Like, I don't think I'm managing it the way I would like to.
But before you answer that, can I just ask a question? If you're getting to your desk earlier than what you were when we were going to the office, what time are you getting to your desk now? Given that every time, even if I came in at 7 a.m., you were at your desk.
No, I'm at my desk at 7, but there's no commute, right? So I'm just saying, like it's, I'm still at my desk super early, but I had that 1 hour of commute. But instead of like using that to like just, you know, I feel like any empty time I had, so I'm still having lunch at my desk and I'm at home. It makes no sense, you know what I mean? But I'm just wondering, like, I feel like you're made from the same kind of cloth. You kind of, you're a workaholic, right? You see a gap in time as an opportunity, but that's not generally healthy, right?
Yeah, I actually think, I would guess, if I was to look at it, that I'm actually probably working less. And I think the reason for that is, like, when I look back at what I was doing pre this, like, I was batshit crazy because I'd get into the office as soon as I possibly can. I would go for client meetings all across the UK. So you're like working on a train to Manchester, then you're like working on your way. And I would never drive anywhere because, you know, time not driving meant I could be doing emails on my phone or on my laptop. And that's how I like planned my days. And then I'd usually do like 3 client dinners a week. So I'd get in at like, I mean, I live like an hour's commute from our office, but I would get in at like 11:30, get up and do the same thing every single day in the week. And then my other half says, like, at the moment, because I've got so much energy because I'm not kind of doing the jazz hands constantly. At the weekend, I'm so irritating because usually I'm knackered and I can barely string a sentence together. And now I'm like, let's go for a walk. Let's play cards. Let's do this. And he's just like, this is not the you that I signed up to. And I mean, I'm powering through books. I've probably read like 12 books since we've been in lockdown. But because I'm not schlepping across London and across the UK, I've got so many more hours back in the day. My thing is, if I've got something to do, I can't not do it. So I would be far happier staying up till like 3 a.m. to make a headway and to start on everything. And then, you know, not sit at my desk till 9 o'clock, till 10 o'clock the next day, and then kind of kick in that cycle again. So I think I've got a bit more discipline that's also involving, 7 o'clock, I have to have a drink in my hand because I'm like, it's officially the evening, and that's the way I differentiate. Because you can probably see I'm sitting in a dining room because my other half has got the office. The kitchen's right there. So actually, the only way I can break things up is like Diet Coke to a Coors Light.
So it feels like you're doing less, but efficiency is probably what's happened.
Yes, yeah. And I'd say the whole team is so much more efficient. The one thing that worries me is, as a team, we very much felt like a family. You know how many times someone pisses in the day because you like see the people leaving and exiting the office. And again, because I can be, and I know this is bad on my part, I can be quite laser focused. Actually, what's happening is you cut out the fluff. But that means you don't know as much about what's going on in people's lives. And obviously we're not doing as much. So the highlight is whether you had a beer or a glass of wine, what you had for dinner the night before. You're not going out. You're not going to the cinema to see something. You're not going to like the new bar that opened around the corner from the office. But that kind of like, it feels much more like a functioning office versus like the family that it kind of was before.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Has it impacted on, because one of the things that we've spoken about is creativity. Like, you know, when you get that energy, that vibrancy, when you've got a group of people together and you're thinking creatively, how have you guys navigated that from a creative standpoint, given the work that you were doing?
That bit is hard. And what we've tried to do and what tended to work the best is like trying to make it as less of a work thing as possible, which sounds weird, but we'll be like, right, 5 p.m, we'll all just jump onto a Zoom, have like a glass of wine together and just like chat through things that we've seen and we've thought to try and get that kind of energy and excitement and hype going. We do still have like our team WhatsApp group and we're constantly sharing things, and like there's an idea that I think is about to get signed off by a client, which would be huge. And it literally came from someone sending something funny on like someone else's Instagram picture. And I was like, fucking hell, this is what we need to do for this client. And I was like, so I sent this really overhyped, like crazy person WhatsApp message. And then literally I came to my desk the next day and the team had like put it into a few slides. And I was like, holy shit, like this is probably the best idea that we've had. But it's trying to force yourself to like, and like force the creativity the way you may have previously.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Because I mean, I
tend to do like my team one-to-ones whilst I'm walking outside, because it just means that I'm not distracted by my computer and I'm not thinking about like what else I should be doing or could be doing. And then you do tend to go off on a bit of a tangent. And I have definitely noticed in the podcast that I am so word vomity because I obviously haven't been speaking to as many people as
we can do this weekly if you want.
Words I've got to say, I'm like, oh God, that has gone really far back into my brain there.
No, it's so funny that you say that, by the way. We were always having daily calls with the team, and they were supposed to be half hour, 1 hour, and then all of a sudden Steve and I are like, kind of feels like we're repeating ourselves a lot. Let's do them like every other day, right? Let's do them like 3 times a week and see if we need them. The first comment we got from someone on our team was, man, I miss our calls. Can we at least have the call once a day so we can just all chat and catch up? And I completely respect that. And you're right. Like when you're a family, when you're an agency, and when you work together so hard creatively as well, you kind of need that engagement. You need that human interaction, even if it means, doing that with a Zoom call. But yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from.
We've done some fun things too. Like there's an influencer we work with called Kelly, and she's actually a dance teacher. And so I was like, cool, like we've been doing weekly Zoom calls, virtual pub quizzes or whatever you call them. But everything's focusing around like booze and drinking. So I was like, right, 6 p.m, laptops away, we're going to do a dance class, but you all have to send me your like dance routine to the TikTok video afterwards so I can prove everyone did it. And there's like funny little challenges we're doing that have really got people going. And it's like, and then you can like mock people because you've got like, the people who just have no rhythm whatsoever, or like will do something completely left field. And there's always like, I'm the worst at quizzes. I get really panicky that I don't know the answer. Then I start freaking out and I just can't do it. So you always have something to like kind of laugh about and to mock people for, which again kind of gets the funness flowing again.
I'm going to steal that idea because we were doing quarantine, which was a daily TikTok. You would nominate the next person, you would do it, you'd create a TikTok, and gradually the bar got higher and higher. Lauren and Jojo were like losing their mind
Like
with
next
the
level,
where we were
yeah.
getting where we were
They
getting.
destroyed us. They
But
destroyed us.
let's go down the dance route. I like that. That's a takeaway.
That was really
I mean,
good.
that's the whole point of TikTok, right? Most of it, like 90% of it.
No, not if you drove some friends like me, right?
Yeah. Cool. All right, Sedge. You know, we've been talking for an hour. I know you've really enjoyed it. We could probably keep going, I think, for a long time. But you know, we really enjoyed it. I hope we can have you on post-COVID and see how things kind of evolve.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe have another catch up. But thanks so much for making it to our show, to DUCKit. We really, really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right.
Talk to you guys soon.
All right. Thanks, Sedge.